It's been a year now of Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, in which some of the worst atrocities of the 21st century, some of the worst crimes it is possible for humans to commit, have been live streamed to us every single day, all facilitated by Western states and the US administration of Joe Biden in particular. The mass slaughter of the Palestinian people, with credible estimates from medics and public health experts ranging from 119,000 killed to 186,000 killed to 335,500 killed. Gaza had a pre-war population estimated between 2.2 million and 2.3 million. So such estimates would suggest a rate of killing comparable to, or in excess of, Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, and certainly the worst rate of killing since the Rwandan genocide of 1994. Even if you use the official death toll of 41,000, which excludes thousands missing under rubble, or those killed because of, say, the destruction of healthcare, or those in unmarked graves, or frankly, above all else, because of the collapse of the reporting system as civilization, the basics of it are destroyed, it would still be a war with a much worse rate of killing than Iraq, Syria, Yugoslavia, you name it. As per Oxfam's research, in the last year, more women and children have been killed than in any conflict in the same time period for the last 2 decades. The vast majority of Gaza's population has been violently displaced repeatedly. Around 100,000 have been maimed and injured. Most civilian infrastructure, homes, schools, hospitals, universities, mosques, churches, libraries, we could go on, have been damaged or destroyed to the extent Gaza looks a different colour and texture when looked at from space. Mass incarceration without charge in the most barbaric conditions imaginable. Torture on an industrial scale. Mass reports of rape and gang rape. And as per Save the Children, the sexual abuse of child detainees. The destruction of the healthcare system, with all hospitals destroyed or damaged. Over 900 medical workers killed. Children having amputations and women having cesareans with no anaesthetic. The biggest slaughter of journalists in any conflict in recorded history. The biggest slaughter of aid workers in any conflict in recorded history. The biggest slaughter of UN staff in any conflict in recorded history. Overwhelming evidence of little children killed with sniper shots to the head or massacred in their cars, terrified alongside their families. The bodies of Palestinians thrown from roofs by IDF soldiers, ISIS style. A man-made famine thanks to a siege of food, medical supplies, and the other basic essentials of human existence, as well as a violent pogrom in the West Bank, and now an Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Now, almost a year ago, I recorded a video. It was the 9th of October, so 2 days after the 7th of October attacks. I'm not sharing extracts from this video because of some smug "I told you so," a public school type desire to show off how right I was. I'm sharing these extracts because there has been one theme I've doggedly stuck to throughout this genocide, which is this. Nobody must be allowed to say, "I did not know what was really happening." Nobody must be allowed to plead ignorance. It was clear from the very start, not with the benefit of hindsight, what was going to happen. There has to be accountability, and in that spirit, we must make it clear we said from the start what would happen, and we were right. What I said in that video wasn't based on any special insight or genius. I just did 2 things. I looked at precedent, that is Israel's past behaviour, and I took the genocidal statements of Israel's leaders at face value. I didn't think it was hyperbole. I didn't think, they were letting off steam or something. When they promised to commit war crimes, when they promised to exact collective punishment against the Palestinian people, when they promised mass destruction, I believed them. And indeed, those statements proved the most accurate predictor of what Israel would in fact go on to do. Now, it's clear in that video that grave war crimes were committed on the 7th of October, for which there's no defence. More on that shortly. I warned in this video that Palestinians were dehumanised and that no worth was attached to their lives. Here's what I said near the beginning of the video. Now, the same basic commitment to innocent civilian life, to protecting it that I just expressed, that applies, or should apply, to Gaza, to Palestinians. But, in truth, it doesn't. Now, if asked, the vast majority of people would say that human life is of equal worth regardless of nationality, ethnicity, or religion, but we have to be honest here. In practice, many just do not believe this. Some deaths matter far more than others. This is known as a hierarchy of death, and Palestinians are near the bottom. This is the inevitable consequence always of occupation and colonisation. When European states subjugated their colonies, they rationalised that subjugation by stripping their colonial subjects of their humanity. They were lesser, inferior people and thus could be treated as such. Now, believing that some people's lives are inherently inferior is racism. And we should say that loud and clear because anti-Palestinian racism is rampant, unchallenged and respectable. Now, however this current nightmarish episode ends, there is only one certainty, and that is far more Palestinians will die and be maimed. This has been an absolute iron rule and certainty in decades of occupation. As I say there, as I said, Palestinians will die and be maimed. Well, yes, far more a year on. An estimated 36 Israeli children were killed on the 7th of October. A conservative estimate would make it 14,000 or so Palestinian children since. What I emphasise in this video is that without the context of what the Palestinian people had suffered for so long, there could be no understanding of what had happened and what would go on to happen too. Now, if we don't talk about the decades-long occupation, if we don't talk about apartheid and Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and Israeli human rights organisation B'Tselem have all called this apartheid, if we don't talk about the theft of Palestinian land and its illegal colonisation by Israeli settlers, if we don't talk about the 248 Palestinian civilians, including 40 children, killed by Israeli forces and settlers alone this year before the current violence began, then yes, horrors like this will seem to suddenly appear like lightning from a clear blue sky, but that is not the truth. Take those 248 Palestinian civilians and kids. Did you even know about them? Be honest. Did you know about them? Did you know they existed? I don't think you did, in all honesty, and that isn't your fault, because there is almost no interest in those deaths. There is no meaningful coverage of what happened to them, because Palestinian life is simply not deemed to be of any worth or importance, and what's more, we all know it. Indeed, between January 2008 and September 2023, out of 6,715 deaths in Israel and Palestine, 95% were Palestinian and 4.6% were Israeli. Out of 158,867 injuries, 4% Israeli, 96 Palestinian. But you know that the horror and condemnation for this overwhelming proportion of Palestinian deaths and injuries is simply not there. They are not regarded as human beings like you and me, and if they were, their deaths would not be tolerated. Well, again, that basic dehumanisation of the Palestinian people is a theme I've continually returned to, so that the mass slaughter of Palestinians, for example, before the 7th of October was simply erased. Here's a key part. And now even greater horrors are to come. Listen now to the Israeli Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant.
We are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything will be closed. We are fighting against human animals and we are acting accordingly.
Now let's be clear, these words, what's been uttered here, are on one level collective punishment. That is illegal under international law. What he's speaking about there is commitment to a war crime. It's also the language of genocide. That is genocidal language. And we all know it. Human animals, you say this to justify doing anything and everything to those you're going to inflict suffering upon. Now, Netanyahu has already said that the people of Gaza must leave because of what is to be unleashed, but there is nowhere to escape. They cannot get out. There is nowhere to go. As I say here, what Yoav Gallant, Defence Minister, promised here was to commit war crimes, and his language was genocidal. But here's the thing. There were countless such genocidal pronouncements at the time. That was just one of them. But many Western media outlets didn't even cover such statements. And when they did cover, say, that statement, you got a failure to explicitly describe what that statement was, what that promise was, which was a promise to break international law. I mean, it's just clear cut. What he promised there, cutting off the basics of human existence as civilians, is a violation of international law. It's just a factual description. That was missing. You didn't get that accompanying that statement in multiple Western media outlets. What's striking about it is a siege did happen, has happened, is happening, and it caused famine. And the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor issued a request for arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, focusing on that specific crime arising from siege. What should have happened, if we had a functioning media in the West, is the coverage should have been framed around the explicit, countless, multiple genocidal threats and specific commitments to collective punishment and to commit war crimes by Israeli leaders and officials. That didn't happen, even though it proved a hideously accurate predictor of what in fact went on to happen. In journalism, and those media outlets must not be allowed to get away with it. Let me be blunt here. How is it possible for me, and isolated within the Western media, newspaper columnist, sitting there in an Airbnb in Liverpool during a Labour Party conference, how is it possible for me to accurately call out genocidal language and the specific commitment to war crimes on the basis of this shows what was going to happen, which was then vindicated in the worst possible way, but not the rest of the media? And again, I didn't need special insight. I'm not a prophet. I just took seriously what Israeli leaders said they were going to do, which they then went and did. Then I referred to the statement of then British Foreign Secretary, the unfortunately named James Cleverly. Listen now to our Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly.
In terms of the Israeli response, do you think it is proportionate for Israel to cut off water, electricity, food, fuel, all of those things to the people of Gaza?
Israel has a right to defend itself against attack. The UK completely supports Israel's right to defend itself proportionately. The truth of the matter is that this was a terrorist attack perpetrated by Hamas, who are embedded in Gaza, shielding themselves amongst the Palestinian people in Gaza. And we will continue to support Israel as it seeks to defend itself against this brutal terrorist attack initiated by Hamas.
So there you have it. The official position of the British government is to support war crimes. That's what he's saying here. Culpability for the atrocities which will now undoubtedly be committed in the coming days, weeks and months will be shared with Western governments. Israel is their ally, armed and backed by them, just as the future of the Palestinian people has been disregarded by them. And now some will try to absolve themselves of cheering on this bloodbath by simply blaming Hamas and claiming that Hamas is responsible for all the coming bloodshed and all the lives that will be lost. No, it's not true. Every atrocity committed by the Israeli state is a choice, and their bullets and bombs will kill civilians, including children. As I said here, the British government was giving a blank cheque to Israel to commit what I said would be the atrocities which will now undoubtedly be committed in the coming days, weeks and months, and that therefore culpability for those atrocities, which were clearly going to happen, would be shared with Western governments arming and backing Israel. As I said, a bloodbath was coming and there could be no excuses. The Israeli state and the Western backers were responsible. This is why I also wrote on the 24th of October 2023 a column for The Guardian entitled "Israel is clear about its intentions in Gaza. World leaders cannot plead ignorance of what is coming." I wrote there that those who back this obscenity would try and wash their hands of it at a future date, and that we must not let them. As I said in that column, from collective punishment by depriving innocent people of water, food, energy and medicine to indiscriminate bombing of civilian excuses. And then there was this. On the 27th of November 2023, I posted a video. It was after a British-Israeli friend got my name on the list of a screening by the IDF in central London of footage of atrocities committed by Hamas and other armed groups on the 7th of October. What I then did is a lengthy video in which I very clearly set out what I had seen. I was always clear then, and before, and since, that grave war crimes had been committed on the 7th of October for which there's no defence. No cause on earth ever justifies killing civilians. I also set out what wasn't in the video footage, and for that I was absolutely vilified, lied about, and my job was threatened. But everything I said was correct, factually correct, and subsequently vindicated by an in-depth Al Jazeera documentary. You see, the Israeli state and its cheerleaders focused on the atrocities that didn't happen rather than the atrocities that did. Why? To project the image of Gaza being full of the subhuman, depraved sociopaths to numb people's empathy or outrage as Gaza was wiped from the face of the earth, and because the Israeli state was always going to murder far more civilians. So to present the violence committed by the Israeli state as pure compared to the depravity of Hamas and other armed groups. In other words, to focus on atrocities that didn't happen rather than the ones that did, because there wasn't enough of a distinction between those sorts of atrocities and what Israel was going to do and did do in order to justify genocide. Now, even as the worst possible crimes have been committed in the last year, mass murder of civilians, mass destruction of civilian infrastructure, torture, rape, ethnic cleansing, we could go on. There has been this abominable failure to properly portray accurately what has actually happened, even though it was clear from the start what would happen. So I say all this again for a very clear reason. We, and I say we, on the grounds that far more knowledgeable and eloquent people said all this at the time. We knew what was going to happen. We said what was going to happen. And mainstream media outlets overwhelmingly failed on those counts and instead echoed Israeli propaganda, stripped away historical context, dehumanized the Palestinian people, failed to accurately cover heinous war crimes. We could go on, and doing so made themselves accomplices to genocide. Well, if you're going to be an accomplice to genocide, you must be held to account, just like journalists were held to account for their role in the Rwandan genocide. Over the course of this year, this channel has done its best to offer an alternative, offering up the voices you need to hear, the facts that are being erased, the horrors that are being ignored. In the year ahead, it's my intention to expand the operation, not least given the US presidential election, its aftermath beckons, and I'm afraid many horrors also to come. But you've made all that this channel has done possible. I've done everything I can not to let you down. But finally, a tribute, and this is really important. We wouldn't know the actual reality of this hideous crime of historic proportions without Palestinian journalists who've been slaughtered, often alongside their little kids and their entire families. The work people such as myself do in the West is only possible because of their work, which they do and did do in impossible circumstances. We must never, ever stop paying tribute to them. They are the lions of the world press pack. They will be remembered throughout the ages. And if they can keep using their platforms to tell the truth about one of the worst crimes of our time while risking their lives every single day, then those of us in far more privileged circumstances, well, that is the very least that we can do. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your thoughts and your comments. Help keep us the show on the road. Patreon.com/Genocide84. I should say we're going to cover the US elections. So our plan is to do videos across the United States. So help us do that. Listen to some podcasts. I'll speak to you soon.